Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Carpenter. I'm the Invasive Phragmites Project Coordinator with Georgian Bay Forever, and I'm just going to go through a brief presentation over the status of sites in Honey Harbour and the surrounding regions as of this year, 2021. This year, we hired 4 summer students to work removing invasive Phragmites from Georgian Bay. We had 2 students down in Tay Township, as well as 2 students, these 2 on the bottom right here, Adam and Dave, in the township of Georgian Bay. So they would have been out on the water in Honey Harbour, Cognasheen, Severn Sound, all of those areas this year in our Baykeeper. So you might have seen them while you were out. So here we have the Honey Harbour area and regions surrounding it, and with each point representing an individual site of Phragmites. Just to give you sort of some reference, at the top we have Cognasheen, on the right that's Highway 400, at the bottom Macy's Bay and Wolverine Beach, and then here in that land that is a bit of a darker green color, that's both Slate Island or Georgian Bay Islands National Park. And you can see there's some other spots that are that color as well. Now, there is invasive Phragmites growing on those shorelines, but I have not included it in these maps just because we do not do any removal on Georgian Bay Islands National Park land, but so they're in charge of that themselves. Anyway, so green on this map here represents sites that are in a monitoring or eradicated stage. And what this means is that we have not seen any regrowth at these sites. So they've previously existed and been cut, and now they are not there anymore. Yellow represents sites that GBF staff and volunteers / community members cut this past season. Blue represents native Phragmites. It's sort of scattered throughout. There's multiple different native sites, but it is pretty rare. And lastly, red represents sites that are left untreated. So they were not cut, and they are still existent right now. Here I have a table that divides up those sites that we just saw into 4 different regions: Cognasheen, Honey Harbour, Wolverine Beach, Macy's Bay, and Corey Island. And the reason we do this is more so for our own understanding, staying organized and collecting data, because Phragmites doesn't actually know these boundaries of regions throughout Georgian Bay. But by breaking it up this way, it helps us with our management. So we have almost 100% control in the surrounding regions of Honey Harbour, and including Honey Harbour itself. It's a great success story with the amount of Phragmites that has been eradicated and monitored, but also cut. So when we talk about control, we talk about the green and the yellow dots that we saw on the previous map. Corey Island, unfortunately, has less control. It is quite infested in some very, very large sites. And this year and into future years, we are going to be putting a lot more effort towards working to remove invasive Phragmites from Corey Island shorelines. Now, here we have a more localized map of the Honey Harbour area. So 217 invasive Phragmites sites throughout the area. Again, the colors represent the same thing. We only had 7 sites that were left untreated this past summer in Honey Harbour, and this was purely due to the fact that we were unable to access them, or the sites have been essentially passed over to someone else for management and control. So for example, we have in South Bay, there's one red point, and that's a site that the students were not able to cut due to construction going on, and it just wasn't safe to get into that area. We also have a site around Lily Pond, which, if you recall, there were truckstores brought to Lily Pond a few years ago that did some massive removal. We have a little bit of regrowth, but it is on the roadside and on some private property. So it is up to those property owners to get rid of it. We checked the site this summer and we just saw a little bit of regrowth, but it could have been cut by now. I'm not exactly sure at this moment. And then this year we had a drop in water level. So it was about 2 feet shallower than last year. So there was a few sites, as you can see down here around Roberts Island and Bayview Park, that the students actually weren't able to get the boat to, or because of the drop in water level, we actually had sites that were up on private property behind fence lines. So we weren't able to access them. And we would have had to get cottage owner permission to go up onto their property and that sort of thing. So it was just a little bit tricky with that this year. But otherwise, we would have had 100% control. So of that map I just showed you, here's a comparison table of our progress since last year, 2020. We have an increase in the total number of sites. We found approximately 20 new sites in Honey Harbour. And the reason for that could be due to the fact that there are still sites growing in Honey Harbour that could be spreading their seeds and their or fragmenting root systems. So we cut 76 sites in Honey Harbour this year. So though we have 97% control, we still did have to cut quite a few. So that could be a result of these new sites we're finding. Also, like I mentioned before, Phragmites knows no boundaries. So if there's Phragmites growing, for example, on Corey Island, where it's really infested, it is quite possible that it could be spreading from these outer regions. Fortunately, though we've had this increase in number of sites, we were able to cut all of those new sites that were found, and we were able to increase our amount of control this year. So more sites were put into that monitoring stage, and more sites were cut than years before. So that's more green and yellow on our map that we're seeing. And this is due to the fact that we had more students this year, and we actually had purchased a second boat for our students down in Tay Township. So they could really focus on their work down in Tay, and then Adam and Dave could really focus on the Georgian Bay Township area for the entire summer. In addition, as we know, excuse me, invasive Phragmites takes multiple years to remove, so multiple years of cutting, but every year it gets smaller and more sparse. So as the sites get smaller every year, we are able to increase our amount of control year to year. So our program is working. Our sites are decreasing in size and density, and this is leading to eradication. This is thanks to our 2 staff members, Adam and Dave, as well as we had 2 students down in Tay Township that would have helped once in a while, as well as our volunteers. So we had a couple of community events this year, but because of COVID, it was a little tricky to do this. We had a small group cut around Roberts Island, and then we were also on Corey Island doing a lot of work. So like I said, it was quite infested there this year. So we brought truck stores from the Invasive Phragmites Control Center for 2 days around Corey Island, and they removed 2 extremely large sites that would have taken our staff days to weeks to be able to remove. So that was fantastic. And then we also had a community cut prior to this, hosted at Corey Island, and there were a lot of community members that were able to attend this, and it was a bit later in the season. We were able to remove quite a bit of Phragmites through that. So just to reiterate, we are almost at 100% control in Honey Harbour. It's such an amazing success story, but I would like to highlight again that tackling invasive Phragmites is a collaborative effort. So if we stop now, Phragmites can still spread from other surrounding regions. And as we see in Honey Harbour, we're still cutting quite a few sites every year. So if they were left untreated, they would grow back to being extremely large, and they would start spreading again and essentially erase everything that has been done over the last few years. So for 2022, we would really like to be able to continue our work in Honey Harbour, but also the surrounding regions to really to protect an area that is under so much control. So I'd like to thank the Honey Harbour Association We really appreciate the $5,000 that has been given to us to allow this amount of progress in Honey Harbour. And we hope in 2022, we can continue that work with another $5,000 donation from the association. And I'd also like to thank the association for all the volunteer and community time, because really that is where all of our success originates from. Thank you.